You're listening to Wild Things and Wild Places, a Muley Fanatic Foundation podcast that aims to discuss issues and efforts related to the Muley Fanatic Foundation mission, the conservation of mule deer, furthering the sport of hunting, and sound wildlife management.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley fanatic.
It's time for Wild Things and Wild Places. And here's your guide, Joshua Coursey.
Yeah, welcome to Wild Things and Wild Places. Joining me today, I've got Dan Gate. He is the Executive Director for Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much, Josh. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. I had a chance to visit with you a couple of weeks ago at our Muley Fanatic Foundation chapter event that was held in the Loveland area, bringing kind of our Greeley and our Denver chapter efforts into one event. And you spoke at that event. I had a brief opportunity to visit with you, but then you showed a video and the tables were all littered with your propaganda because this is a very important issue and people beyond the borders of Colorado really need to be paying attention to this because it could be coming to an area near you soon.
One of the biggest misnomers is you look at state boundaries and people think that, what happens in Colorado or what happens in Michigan is Michigan or Colorado's problem. But in this case, nothing could be further from the truth.
Let's get right to it because there are a couple of ballot initiatives that are being put forth in the state of Colorado that have a significant impact potentially for really what I believe to be an attack on the North American model of conservation. Is that fair?
I think that's probably fair and at some degree an understatement because of the statutory component of these citizens initiatives for ballot initiatives that try to alter a variety of different things, most of which is the mountain lion and bobcat issue, which right now is known as Initiative 91, but we're referencing it as the hunting ban, the Colorado hunting ban, because those initiative numbers will change. And so we're trying to get people to not concentrate on numbers so much as the problem.
When you look at these initiatives, I mean, they are littered with misinformation being utilized and weaponized, coining such terms as trophy hunting, if you will, to really mislead the public and potential voters. Yeah. You call a spade, that's what it is.
Yeah, the lies and deceit, smoke and mirror shell game that our oppositions have figured out what they think resonates with the general public. They've hijacked terms, they've misused language, and if these things were to pass because of the statutory component, not a regulatory component, they could be easily used as a precedent, not only here in Colorado, but other Western states and across the nation because of the statutory precedent. And it's easier for other legislators or agencies or entities to try to alter their specific wildlife management objectives because somebody else did it first. And it's actually in law, not just a regulation.
That's really where the smoke and mirrors comes. I'm glad you hit on that because I think that once you create that legal component, it's a different ballgame. And for folks to think that maybe that would happen in Colorado, but it's never going to happen in Wyoming or Montana or Idaho or a state that really puts hunting as a priority in their sportsman culture. But that's just not how the game is played.
No, and I think a lot of it, too, Josh, is the fact that they capitalized on the lackadaisicalness or the complacency with mediocrity from our particular community. The hunting and angling hook and bullet side of things have a tendency historically to turn a blind eye, maybe not pay attention, maybe have our head in the sand or maybe be under a rock. We're concentrating on application deadlines and preference points and where we're going to hunt and how we're going to hunt and shed season's getting ready to come up. And then you got graduations and all the family stuff. And the opposition takes advantage of timing to be able to unleash things. Now, we've been dealing with this particular issue back since in September of 23, but that was right in the middle of hunting season. So if we weren't fully prepared at the time to engage, it probably would have went unnoticed by the hunting community, and they would have been able to get what they wanted a lot sooner to go through the legal process to get the initiative on the ballot for the upcoming November election season.
Yeah, I think it's clear. This is not merely a local issue. The ramifications of impact that this could potentially span across multiple states. But Dan, let's back up just a minute. I want to talk about your role specifically and how the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management came to be. How long has the organization? You're a 501c4, which does permit you a lot more lobbying leeway. You are still a tax-deductible entity. But how did it come to be? When did it come to be? And how did you get to the position that you're in to lead this charge?
I've been playing at this level for a long time, Josh, and we started the organization back in 2016. And while I have always been involved in boards and committees and chairmanships and so forth, I'm still the president for the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters Association. And a buddy of mine and I, Chris Journey, decided back in 2017 that we needed to up our game in Colorado, primarily because there wasn't any C4 representation. All the acronym groups that we're all members of were C3s. And we knew that the gubernatorial administration that was probably likely to come on board at that time had a lot of animal extremist influence. The governor's husband, the first gentleman, is an extreme animal activist and brings with him a lot of things that are negative for the conservation and hunting and angling community and the agriculture community for that matter. And we decided to formulate this organization in 2017. Governor Jared Polis was elected in 2018. By 2019, we were fighting things on a hard level, even though we were intimately involved at many other levels. We were fighting in 2019, 20, 21, and 22 at a very hard level, which we were victorious on every single aspect that anybody threw at us. And then they came at a ballot initiative in September of 23, tried to alter the course of action that our General Assembly, the Colorado State Legislature, had already defeated with our support. And also we've defeated many things at the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. Same people, same time, just different efforts. And it got us to a point to where we became not only the tip of the spear, but the shaft, and even sometimes I think the arm that throws it. And so with us being a C4, it allows us to do many other things that a lot of our partners in crime can't do or don't have the financial resources to do. And so they're participating and they're helping us, but they can't put their name on some of the language and they can't put their names on some of the documents just because of the tax status that you mentioned.
It's the rules within the game, and that those obligations and responsibilities are held to a standard, and you figured out a way to be able to allow yourself to be more active in this arena, and I applaud that. But I'm curious, in the mission statement that you designed and developed as part of your establishment, there's some key words in there that I think when you read a mission statement, it seems like it's just so superficial, or it's just, Yep, that's what it is. But I think it was very important that you included, and I'm just going to read it, to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. I think the key word that stands out to me when I read that mission statement was the word defend. What does that mean to you when you came up with this mission statement as an organization?
I think that we realized, not just in Colorado, but throughout the western United States and how it's spread to the eastern part of the country as well. Look at what is happening in Canada, Alaska. The North American model is something that should be coveted and should be pedestalized, not bastardized. And we saw an increasing effort within game commissions because of appointments throughout the country that there was a need for somebody to step up and try to defend what everybody else was trying to adhere to. Every organization that we all are members of that do the yeoman's work on habitat conservation all adhere to the North American model. Every game agency mentions or adheres to or believes in the concept of the North American model. But we saw an opportunity that maybe not enough individuals or entities were able to step up and actually promote, enhance, and defend the North American model. Supporting it's one thing, but to be able to turn around and say, we're not going to cross any barriers just for negotiation and compromises, and we're not going to let you cross any barriers to turn around and come take our model and our flag down.
I think that was profound. I think that was very thought-provoking, and I think that provided a lot of foresight. But I applaud that. I do think that when you mention enhance and promote or support, those are elements that are being done on a daily basis by many groups. Our group is one of them, but defend certainly takes it to a different level, and that's where the 501c4 is really a necessity within this arena of wildlife management. On this issue, and you've brought it up a couple of times now, one of the areas that has become weaponized as a strategy, it seems to me, as a Wyoming resident looking at what Colorado is doing, but the appointees that are put in place or put forth as recommendations to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, that's drawing a lot of criticism by sportsmen and sportswomen. Would you like to expand on that?
We're actually, thanks for the question, Josh. We're actually in the middle of a confrontational confirmation component of the commission selection and appointments. And there's 3 individuals that went through the Senate Ag Committee hearings last Thursday, and 2 of which were not supported by a favorable recommendation to go to the Senate floor for a full vote. One individual was actually pushed through, a gentleman by the name of Jack Murphy. 2 other ones, Gary Skiba and Jess Below, were not recommended to go through with a favorable recommendation. So we have a Friday full vote on the Senate floor for all 3 of those individuals. And I know that a lot of our community has reached out in support to uphold the Senate Ag Committee's recommendations, the favorable and unfavorable recommendations. That has drawn a lot of consternation from our opponents, and now they're starting to send their email campaigns and make their phone calls to the legislators that would make the final decision on the floor vote. But the kicker to that is wildlife commissions, parks and wildlife commissions, game agency commissions have the ability to make the decisions on behalf of the agency that are best suited for the agency's missions and objectives. However, politics have taken such a substantial level of participation. And where did politics start on the state level, except from the governor's offices, and how that actually trickles down? Our governor, for instance, gets a chance to appoint those commissioners, which is well within in his purview, whether I like them or not. But when they don't fall into line with the statutory requirements of those particular selections, then there has to be some pushback from some individuals, organizations, and entities. Otherwise, why have the statute? Why have the protocols and criteria and procedures? Why have the requirements? And that's the thing that the sportsman community in Colorado has started to challenge. More often than not, we've been unsuccessful because we are a Democratic-held legislature at this point in time. We are outnumbered Democratic to Republican, 49-16 in the House and 23-12 in the Senate. And for us to get 2 unfavorable recommendations out of 3 with that sort of legislative makeup, it shows that there's maybe not anything other than a fox in a hen house at this point in time. And we're just trying to make sure as a community, not just Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, but as a community, to make sure that we stand up and adhere to the principles and the statutory requirements that are within the law, within the guidelines, and then make sure that the governor is making choices that are of the benefit of all people because of the way that those criteria and requirements are made up.
And that really doesn't necessarily mean it's an attack on the hunting community, although I would think that there are many sportsmen and sportswomen within the boundaries of Colorado that think that there is an assault on their heritage. But when you talk about the wildlife resource and the adherence to the North American model of wildlife conservation, that includes everybody. That includes photographers, that includes campers, hikers, people that just appreciate our natural resources and know that they are enhanced with a thriving population of our wildlife resources on those landscapes.
The way that Colorado has changed demographically and politically and just population-wise over the course of the last 40 years, you started to see a change in mentality. And while it might seem like that mentality was overwhelming, it was still a minority. Back in 1992, we lost bear hunting, spring bear hunting with use of hounds and baiting. And then subsequently, 4 years after that, we lost trapping on public land with the utilization of foothold traps, body gripping devices, and cable restraint devices. Same organizations, same people. The kicker that was different then compared to now is the majority of the population did not engage back then. It's not that everyone was anti-bear hunting or anti-trapping. It's just that the sportsman community, the conservation community, the ag community didn't see this as a necessary evil about trying to defend or defeat anything because they didn't think it was important, because they still looked at their lifestyle as the way it was. They opened their eyes up significantly. And from 1996, after those 2 ballot initiatives, one was a constitutional amendment, the other one was a straight statutory initiative. From 96 until 2020, there was no attempts to turn around and try to do anything because everybody had woken up. They opened their eyes, they got their head out of the sand. Then the wolf issue came up in 2020. That was something that I think caught people by surprise. But there again, the majority of Coloradans that really respect wildlife and natural resource management said, that can't happen here. Nobody wants to bring wolves in here. And lo and behold, we lost by 1.9% because of the population that has expanded so significantly, so exponentially over the course of the last 30 some odd years on the I-25 corridor. And anybody that has driven in Colorado in the last 20 years, they've seen the traffic flow, the population increase from Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, damn near to the Wyoming-Colorado line. That's what's making our wildlife decisions. I saw a bunch of this stuff happen Probably about the mid-90s because of the other issues that were going on. But I really started to pay attention in the early 2000s and really started to get engaged about 2007. And then in 2011, we actually went from the Colorado Division of Wildlife and Colorado Parks to emerge under Governor Hickenlooper to where we are now, CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I think that the groups and the organizations and the landscape probably should have got involved 30 years earlier on a very dynamic level. They didn't. And as you well know, we all are not immortal and we don't live forever. So people that fought those other issues and lost maybe fell off the wagon and they didn't turn around and get engaged, or maybe they passed away, or maybe they turned around and moved. And there was nobody there on a grand scale to start picking up the pieces and say, what do we got to do to prop things up? And honestly, Josh, not until about the last 10 years did you ever even hear anybody mention the North American model. There might have been a reference to it. There was like on the periphery, but it wasn't really in their minds about why do we have what we have? How did it get to where we're at? And where do we need to go with something? And now I think that it's such a pedestal on our end that the other side is trying to marginalize it, bastardize it to where it's worth defending. It's worth attempting to try to defeat these measures at any single level, because if they take it out, where do we go from here? And I'd just like to mention one quick deal. There was a story that I just saw today out of Oregon, where they're hiring a new director for their Oregon Game and Fish Department. And then the chair of their commission says, point blank, as of yesterday, the North American model is obsolete. It should be dismantled. It does not belong here. That's the sort of thing that I think that we should have started 30 years ago. We didn't on our own. We started it 7 years ago, and I'm hoping that other entities, groups, and states start to take hold of it, because if we don't do this collectively, if we don't do this individually, and if we don't turn around and lock our arms in uniformity and collaboration, I think that you'll see states fall by the wayside just because of complacency with mediocrity and the head in the sand.
Do you feel like the hunting community is lacking the organized effort to be able to have the political capital to be able to have a strong influence on these type of decisions?
I don't think they're losing the political capital. I think that they haven't engaged well enough at the political level to maintain that capital. I think that organizations, and I would throw muley fanatics in with this because of the conservation habitat issues that everybody deals with. We deal with species and conservation and land use, and you're the CEO or the president of the muley fanatics, and this is not to put you on the spot, but I think that the organizations that I talk about have not done a historical great job in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to target message to what we consider to be a target audience of the general public, to get them to understand why we do what we do. You don't have to do it. Just recognize the fact that when we do it, we provide you with a benefit. We provide the landscape and the habitat and the visitors and the people of each state a benefit. We provide it for the wildlife. We provide it for the ag community. We provide it economically. We've done a great job for habitat and conservation, species preservation or conservation, depending on what category you want to go into. But the general public doesn't have that knowledge. People want wildlife. They want to know that it's properly taken care of and that we are stewards of it. If they don't know that, how do they know that we are doing what we're doing? And how do they know not to vote on something when the time comes to do it?
And I think when you start hearing things like what you heard or read today coming out of Oregon, to even mutter the very mention that the North American model of wildlife conservation is obsolete, you talk about drawing a line in the sand. Science-based wildlife management is what allows for us to have the resources that we have. It's like killing the frog in boiling water. It's a slow thing, but you look back now, even yourself, acknowledging that 30 years ago we should have been maybe a little bit more organized. I think that if we don't get ahead of this and really start to think about what could come, there is a lot at stake here, things that define who we are and what we pursue every day, just in passion, but as a stewardship responsibility for what we believe to be the core of our very existence.
Yeah, I often get into these conversations, and because I've become what some refer to as a social media megastar in the last 8 weeks because of all the crap that we're having to fight and what we're doing, that was not my intention by any means, and I say that tongue-in-cheek. I've done more podcasts, had more outreaches, more opportunities, more generosity given to our direction, because there's something there that we ought to be able to figure out a way to capitalize on holistically and collectively, industry-wide, community-wide, and people are resonating with a message that maybe they didn't hear enough, or they didn't have anybody or any entity to be able to follow suit with and try to provide some sort of addition to that to be able to help support it. But what I'll tell you is we've created a movement on a very short period of time, Josh, that is pretty damn phenomenal, not only in the messaging and the education and the information, but the outreach and the fundraising and the connectivity and the strategies that are being built up. Never in my life have I ever seen organizations, let alone industry, step up to the level that they have. Never in my life have I seen these celebrity podcasters and celebrity sportsmen and women in industries willing to lock arms and say, we are joining forces with our competitors. We're joining forces with the guys that we don't even really like or get along with, but we're in the same industry because we need to support the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. We need to support science-based wildlife management. We need to support the industry and the economic and the stewardship side of science-based wildlife management that is all incorporated at so many different levels. And I can just tell you, I just came out of Bozeman, Montana. I got home last night, and I spent 3 days with 3 individuals up there. I was on the Ranella Meat Eater podcast. I was on the Randy Newberg podcast. I spent some time with Jason Matzinger. All of them are like, what can we do? How do we help? What do you need? How can we formulate a plan? Where can we strategize? And then it just expands out even farther than that when you get into the industry side of things. It's never happened in my lifetime. You guys were so gracious. Scott Hampel helped set us up, played our videos, gave us a point at your fundraising banquet. Put all of our literature at your fundraising banquet, has contributed money to our efforts on behalf of everybody. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has got 20, 30, 40, 50 chapter banquets in Colorado. They're doing the exact same thing. They're advertising for CRWM because they know that we're doing the yeoman's work on these fights. Colorado Chapter of Safari Club International, the mothership of Safari Club International, National Wild Turkey Federation, the Colorado Outfitters Association, Colorado Bow Hunters Association I'm going to this week. All of these organizations, statewide and out of state, are coming together going, we don't care about our competitors' money or so forth. We need to make sure that we are lockstep in this, and we need to make sure that our enemy sees us as a unified effort, as a formidable opponent.
One thing that is always in Wyoming and just in the West in general, there is always a strong proponent of being able to maintain and keep what is just basically put under an umbrella as your Second Amendment rights. Do you see that as an effort that can be had in other arenas in regards to wildlife management and political representation of those that have been put into a position of public service to represent a constituency of people? Let's face it, the political issues that the legislative bodies in any state deal with are broad and very diverse. There are certain issues. We all cannot be involved and engaged at an intimate level with all of the issues that our legislative members deal with within their session. But when you look at certain issues, Second Amendment rights, that always ranks high. Someone always has an opinion, a hard opinion on abortion. But the sporting community, the hunting community, and the heritage that comes with that, do you see where there's an opportunity to be able to provide letter grades on candidates in political positions that are currently held as incumbents, of where the sporting community knows where those folks vote and how they align, and if they disalign, to be able to rally against that?
That's a good and interesting question. What I can say, and I can't speak for every elected official throughout the country or from a federal standpoint, but there's a strong alignment when you get into Second Amendment rights issues, not always, but a strong alignment that are more animal rights or animal extremist or animal terrorist alignments as well. There's a strong alignment when it comes into agricultural issues. It is a partisan issue that needs to be addressed in some capacity. And I hear guys talk about, and I've played this game long enough, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm a Rhodes Scholar when it comes to politics, but we are the only organization in the state that has full-time lobbying representation at the Colorado State Capitol. We've got 3 lobbyists. We started that back in 2018, and we've got 3 lobbyists representing sportsmen and women at the Capitol. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation just recently ended up hiring a contract lobbyist for Elk Foundation issues that lobbyist is still part of our coalition that we deal with on other things. But the reason I'm saying this is because we felt the need to engage in all things conservation. And if you figure out who your allies and your adversaries and the neutral commonalities that you might have, most of it falls on the Republican or the independent side. Very little of it often falls on to the Democratic side. Now, I'm not throwing Democrats out with the bathwater here, but the old school Democrats that I know that used to be former legislators, that used to support agricultural wholeheartedly and firearms representation and conservation and wildlife management, a lot of times these guys are throwing their hands up and they're like, that's not my party. I didn't vote for that sort of stuff. That's why I got out. I couldn't support what's going on. And so I start to see an ideological change, at least from our perspective in this state. And for instance, you mentioned the Second Amendment, and I'll briefly go over a few things just to show how, in my mind, hypocritical and with a level of lunacy. We've got a House Bill 1348, which is a storage in vehicles bill from the House. 4 of those individual sponsors regularly support all forms of wildlife issues as far as trying to take it away. They don't support them from a management perspective. They don't support them from a conservation and a sportsman perspective. But the storage in vehicles deal would require sportsmen to have guns in their vehicles in a locked case, not just unloaded, but in a locked case. There's another one called House Bill 1349, which is a firearms and ammunition excise tax. It's 11% for the state that goes into mental health and such, on top of what the federal side of the excise tax is that we have for Dingell, Johnson, and Pittman Robertson, which goes into the conservation funds that each state benefits off of. Both of those representatives that are bringing that up are animal rights oriented. There's another one that's a firearms dealer requirement, the state's firearms dealer requirement on top of the federal firearms dealer. All of those representatives are all animal activists, extremists, or supporters of such. Prohibition of certain weapons, they call it mass shootings, they call it, assault weapons ban, but it has to do anything with a shroud, anything with a threaded barrel, anything that would hold more than 4 per magazine, a variety of different things. Every single one of those individuals that are sponsoring it are animal activist oriented. Now we're bringing up a firearms liability insurance deal where before you buy a firearm, you would have to have liability insurance. And now there's even components to where they say if kids can't get firearm liability insurance, maybe they shouldn't be able to do hunter education. Maybe they shouldn't be able to hunt. These are animal extremists bringing those things to our table. I could go down the list with another 5 or 6 firearms bills. And if you look to the next line of list that we've got with wildlife bills, all the same people that I mentioned on the Second Amendment stuff goes right into the wildlife bills, except for one Republican, which is Senator Perry Will. Every other single person in one of these things that has to do with wildlife is a supporter of the anti-Second Amendment legislation that we have. I think you could wholeheartedly use a checkbox or a grade sheet that would pretty much say guns, wildlife, agriculture, and you could turn around and give an A, B, C, or D for each one of those and have the same grade come out, and you would end up no better than what you would if you just had firearms legislation type issues on that grade report.
Yeah, that's a sign of the times. It really is, Dan. And where I was going with that is that I know how busy everybody is in their own daily life. You certainly are privy to a lot more information because of the engagement and the intimate understanding of this arena within Colorado. And you know as well as I do how fast legislative sessions move and the varying changes and amendments that occur in a blink of an eye. For someone to be able to look and see, hey, they've got an endorsement from CRWM. Yeah, at the end of the day, when I go to the ballot box, at least I know I can put a checkbox next to someone who I know is going to at least have the same regard for what I believe to be a value in my hunting heritage, and as a sportsman or sportswoman, something I know that they're going to work to protect and enhance themselves.
Yeah, I think, and that's the relationships that we felt so important to try to build at the State House with our lobbying representation. Look, I'm just a dumb bearded trapper, and I've been doing this stuff long enough that I've been running a wildlife control business for damn near 40 years. My kid runs it with us. He runs it with us. He's running it right now because I'm doing all the political crap and fighting this ballot initiative stuff. Sometimes I wonder if he left in the middle of the night, my wife packed all my stuff up and sold it at Goodwill or at some auction, that might be better for them. It's going to be a hell of a lot worse off for me, even though I think that one day I'll get to go do it again. But we the relationships that we built, when I walk into the Capitol, not so I'm so damn important, but even legislators on the other side of the aisle They know who we are. They know what we stand for.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. They know that you're going to be there in support of or in opposition of, and they know they better damn sure reach out to you in some capacity to find your concerns, or to see that you would oppose, or if you'd be willing to amend, or if you want to take a neutrality position. They care because what we created. And I think that's another component, Josh, that we really need to look at down the road is people say we can't make a difference. And I would beg to differ. We're in a state in Colorado that I didn't grow up in. I didn't grow up in this environment. I grew up here, but it's not the Colorado I grew up in. If I want to turn around and save any of what we had, we have to turn around and put a stand up. Well, I'm concerned about what license applications and preference points and all the other stuff are. Our deadlines are April 2nd this year in Colorado for applications. I haven't even looked at anything, because I've been doing all this other stuff. And likely I'll put in for preference points this year and check the boxes because I don't have time to go out and do what I'm fighting for. Last year, my son and I, we actually hunted in Nebraska for 3 days, and we hunted in Colorado for 2 days. And I was immediately dumped back into this stuff because of the things that we had to deal with the Supreme Court and the Secretary of State. And my kid went back to work. We live in Colorado striving for all this stuff, and we took 5 days out of 2 states to be able to hunt last year. And I'm not bitching about that, because I'm proud to be able to do it. But if I could get 8 hours a day of each individual in the state of Colorado to just commit to doing the things that we do. I'm not talking about going to banquets and fundraisers and outdoor picnics and all the other stuff. I'm not talking about pulling fence. I'm talking about going down to the Capitol, the State House, going to the Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting, actually engaging in the process. Give me 8 hours out of a year, 1 day out of a year, 2-hour increments, 1 complete day. If every sportsman and women did that, we would be undeniably the most formidable opponent that our enemies have ever seen. And right now, there's very few of us that are trying to hold up the flag, and a lot of people joining forces to say, here's your $20, here's your $50. I'm sorry, I can't go there and I can't go here. We need people to say, we want to fight for what we strive to engage in. We want to support and defend what we try to recreate in, our avocation. And my wife said, she said, when are you going to, I need to tape your arms to your side. When are you going to quit holding your hand up? We laid in bed the other night, and I said, I've been talking, just throwing things out. And I said, Montana doesn't look too bad. They got their problems. North Dakota would be desolate and barren, but they got their problems. And Kansas, I could live there just because it's centrally located. They got their problems. And she just sat up in bed. She looked at me. And it's the first time she's ever said, if we were to move, because there was always a hard no. We're not moving. Everything we got's paid for. We're established here and listed our lifestyle, everything we've done. And she said, if. And I just looked at her like, well, there's a different movement. If we moved somewhere else, would you promise not to do what you do here once you move there? And I said, as far as like the hunting? And she said, no, as far as the avocation for being able to defend the stuff. And I looked at her and I said, I don't think I could agree to that. And she said, then why go somewhere else to try to pick up somebody else's problems when you're trying to fix everything here?
Good point. Well, I thought you were going to say Wyoming. I was about to tell you, just let her know it's closed. Wyoming is closed. Yeah. If you live in Wyoming, everybody here knows, especially if you live anywhere close to the Front Range, is, yeah, don't Colorado my Wyoming. We're all watching it from afar, and we know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but to that point,
yeah, it's coming.
If you look at any of the stuff, because of your population basis, I saw reports in the latter part of 23 that said that if you changed your demographics that could be voters in the state of Wyoming by 6%, and people wanted to change it to the opposite position of what they're at by 6%, because you've only got 670,000 residents or whatever.
Not even.
You do a 6% increase in your population density, and you could change just like what Colorado has, and it took it 25 years because we've got 6 million people. That's a scary thought.
Yeah, that's how fine the line is. And you're right. All the migration corridor connectivity issues and the science and the equity that is put into habitat restoration and the funding of fence conversion projects and all of the things that conservation groups do. And there are a ton of activities that take place that conservation groups do, and ourselves included. There is a whole nother arena where you are at the consequence of decisions of others. And if you're not involved in that arena, then you truly are at the mercy of somebody else's will. And unfortunately, if you're the minority, and we know as a hunting community we are, then you're subject to things that potentially put what you cherish and value at great risk, and including its non-existence.
I'm a numbers guru just because of the data and the science stuff that we have to turn around and try to convey that resonates with legislators and commissioners or whomever. But one thing that I saw a couple of years ago, that if you classified all the sportsmen, the hunters in the United States, we would be the biggest army in the world just for gun-toting sportsmen. Why can't we be the biggest army in the world when it comes to animal activism in this country? I'm not saying insurrection. I'm not saying buffalo hats. We don't need to turn around and storm any capital. But if they mention that from a worldwide level, talking about an army, why can't we be the most formidable army in the United States when it comes to conservation if somebody looks at that from a worldwide level? To me, it's tongue-in-cheek. But if they just did 8 hours a year and you went from where we're at to 8 hours a year, think how much of an impression that would make legislatively, commission-wise, facilitation-wise, administration-wise, economic-wise. I wouldn't want to screw with us.
That's what it's going to take, Dan, and it really is. Dan, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the message. I appreciate what you do, and I can speak for all sportsmen. Whether you're in Colorado or not, someone is out there on the front lines, and that's what you are. That's what you're doing. You're in the trenches, and you're moving the values forward that we cherish because they're under attack, and I do believe that. I do believe that there is an assault on our hunting heritage that is strong and it is organized. And if we don't equal that in our own efforts to be organized and strategic and recognize where those good offenses need to be, that if we're on the defense and we're not organized, we're going to come up short. Let's not be 30 years from now saying 30 years ago, like you were referencing a few minutes ago, I wished I would have seen this then, or I wish I would have acted then, or we should have acted then. Today's the day. Today's the day.
If you'll allow me the pleasure of being able to just do a call to arms.
Yeah, do it.
Things that we need educational support and we need financial support. And whether somebody lives in Colorado, wants to hunt in Colorado, knows somebody in Colorado, has preference points in Colorado, has hunted in Colorado, help us defeat the enemy at our door on November 5th and help us to be able to supply what everybody strives for Colorado. We still have some of the best hunting in the world. We still have the largest elk population in the world. We still have grand scenic valleys and mountains, and we have things that people would just love to have. That's why it's so popular. That's why we got 6 million people and 84 million visitors that come here. We got 30 million skiers that turn around and come into this state. And we've got tons of hunters that come in, but there's still plenty of places that you can go to find your special spot. We need support from sportsmen and women, and we've been getting that remarkably. We've been getting that to such significant levels that it was beyond my capabilities when we started this campaign back in October. But if anybody has the wherewithal to help us out, go to SaveTheHuntColorado.com. There's a donate button. If they don't want to just donate, Josh, there's 2 things that Safari Club International, the Colorado chapter, has done just starting last Saturday. There's 2 buttons on that website. One is for a mountain lion hunt with a full-body mount. It's a raffle that Safari Club is dealing with. And then another one is a Gunworks raffle. It's a Gunworks 7 PRC with a real high-dollar scope on it, donated by Gunworks and the Salida Gun Shop. You can buy raffle tickets to each one of those, and every single dime off those raffles goes to this fight. If you don't want to buy a raffle ticket, then you can donate. If you want to donate and buy raffle tickets, but those are 2 things that can be done to help us out financially, because fighting the enemy at the level that we have to fight it at during a presidential election year in a more of a liberally minded state with a target audience that is very well populated along that I-25 corridor, we need millions of dollars, and we are on our way to achieving that. But it's not cheap. It's not easy. The strategy teams that we've hired, the campaign managers, the attorney firms, we are in a fight for our lives, and give us the chance to be able to go tit for tat and punch for punch with our opposition. And I'm sure that when we get out of this on November 5th, not only are we going to be victorious, we'll be able to help set the stage, the narrative, and the tone with a playbook and a roadmap that has been proven that we can utilize again here or in any other state because of the wherewithal that we've been able to build up, that everybody was part of the victory, as opposed to looking back in January of 25 to November of 24 and go, we didn't do enough.
I will tell you, the stakes are high. Transcending beyond the borders of Colorado, beyond the fate of mountain lions and bobcats, this truly is, as you just heard it. This is a clarion call for all hunters, anglers, and conservationists across the United States. Support is absolutely imperative in this battle against misinformation, misleading information, and the weaponizing and the manipulation of that information to be able to maintain the preservation of our rich wildlife heritage and our sportsman efforts. So, SaveTheHuntColorado.com. Dan Gates, we'll be in touch and we'll do a follow-up. I guarantee it. Thanks, Dan, for your time.
And that wraps up another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. Make sure you never miss out by subscribing. Whether you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, streaming us on our website, or following us on social media, subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more wild episodes.
Everybody knows I'm a muley fanatic.